I am burnt out on big editing projects right now. Just look at like the last 5 videos I put out. Those were marathon edits, to be frank. And I love you all, but I can't do another one this week, and I'm recovering from this dental thing. It's hell. Instead, I decided to rearrange my office a little bit, get some new stuff, get it set up better. And as you can see, I actually took my upright bass out of the background. It was just looking a little cluttered back there. Now this bass sounds terrible. It needs some work done to it. It's got some natural distortion when that back panel just vibrates against the sides because the glue's coming undone. But I've owned it for about half of my life. See, I signed up for a science class that was too difficult for me in my junior year of high school. My counselor had talked me into some kind of honors AP something or other, and when I went to quit the class, the counselor talked me into staying in the class. So I stuck it out for another week, and when I tried to transfer out again, the counselor said I couldn't quit the class because I had waited too long. She had tricked me. The next day, I skipped my science class and I went to hang out in the music building. I was already in band and choir, so I hung out in the music building a lot, but I never knew that this particular time of day when my science class was going on was also when beginning orchestra met. So I went to the orchestra teacher and I asked to join the class, and she asked me if I'd played electric bass before, so I exaggerated my accomplishments, and then she asked if I'd played upright bass, and I just straight up lied, and she let me join the class on bass. Now, the school didn't recognize my unofficial transfer to beginning orchestra for the entire semester, actually, so I was marked absent every single day. And I want to say for the first couple weeks, someone showed up every now and then, was like, Marcel, you have to go to science, and I just would or would not go. Anyway, that means I took an F on an entire class because the counselor wouldn't let me transfer out of it after 1 week. Remember, this happened after she convinced me to stay for more than 1 week when I tried to get out. I spent half a year learning how to play the upright bass in a class that never happened, at least not officially on my academic record. Anyway, so by my senior year of high school, I was in band, choir, and orchestra, and I was in their after-school equivalents, which was chamber choir, chamber orchestra, and jazz band. And I also composed all the music for a school play, and I composed some pieces for my advanced orchestra, which I was allowed to conduct. I also gigged with a rock band around town. Oh, and men's choir. I was in men's choir too. So I almost didn't graduate because I was so busy with music, and they actually gave me a special award for my accomplishments in managing to scam my counselor into letting me be in every music program. Anyway, I think by that point, my parents were finally coming to terms with the fact that I might be a career musician, and investing a couple grand into an upright bass maybe started to make sense to them. So we did a rent-to-own option at a local string shop, if I remember correctly. I can't remember what the place was called. And it was a smart choice because my first semi-pro gigs were on this bass. So this thing has paid for itself several times over. Which brings us to that time my bass was stolen. So back when this story happens, I'm maybe like between 19 and 21, and I really wanted to play bluegrass back then. I was fresh out of high school. I did not know what bluegrass was, but I very much wanted it. So my friend David suggested I talk to this local band called the LA Ranchers. By the way, all names have been changed for the purposes of this story, except for David's name, because I'm making the announcement after I've already mentioned David. So David actually is his real name. Every other name, including the band name, has been changed. So David told me this band was something close to bluegrass. I now know that they were much closer to maybe like this folk punk kind of thing, or maybe like Go-Go Bordello, but like way worse. The main guy in the LA Ranchers did a bunch of drugs, and he basically burned all the bridges in an area that he could, and then would move to the next area. And he disguised his constant running away from problems as this hip, rambler, free spirit kind of thing on social media. Rinse and repeat. So this guy from the LA Ranchers had managed to secure some kind of small record deal with a local label. Now, our label manager was this guy named Patrick, and I realize now that Patrick might have been the only person that worked at this label, because the label was really just pretend time for adults. There was no label there. It was just Patrick hanging out, producing music. Patrick fancied himself a real multi-instrumentalist, and he had played upright bass for groups before, and him and I got along fine. I babysat for his dogs a couple times. I believe the LA Ranchers even played his wedding. I seem to remember that. And Patrick and I narrowly avoided a serious car wreck when I was behind the wheel and we were driving to Seattle one time. So maybe that's why we got along well enough, at least. Anyway, so this was kind of a rowdy band, and sure, we played some like street fairs, all ages venues like restaurants, or 18 plus stuff like hookah bars, but where we really mostly played was bars. And that was a problem for me because sometimes they do like X's on my hands, or sometimes they wouldn't card me and it would be fine, but sometimes I'd have to leave immediately after our set, and that was really cool because the band would make me just sit in my car and wait for them to be done drinking. I don't remember if they didn't own their own cars or what, but that was a real trash people move, and these were trash people. The worst situation was when the bars wouldn't let me in at all. In that case, someone else would have to play bass for the LA Ranchers, and Patrick from the label would usually do that. He had previously played slap upright in another group, and he seemed more interested in the slapping part than the playing bass part, but you know, what are you gonna do? When it was my job, I did that same kind of style with the LA Ranchers too. One day there's a gig in Seattle, and Patrick has confirmed that they won't let minors in, so I've gotten the call that, hey, Marcel, you can't play this gig. So I tell everyone I'm not driving them to Seattle. I lend them my bass, and they go to Seattle to play the gig. I never see them again. The label dissolves overnight. My bass is gone. They've both blown up their long-term relationships. Shout out to the gal that the main LA Ranchers dude was dating. She was always very kind to me, and I hope she's doing well. She deserves it. Anyway, I'm being ghosted everywhere, except for a few kind of mocking messages that were kind of mean. Sort of this, haha, we got away with your bass thing. Now, I tried to talk to Patrick's wife, but I get nowhere, and the trail goes cold for almost a year. But then I start seeing pictures of them playing gigs with my bass, and some of this is fairly local, but if I remember right, some of this is also in like Colorado and Texas. This is like thousands of miles away. With my bass, I can see that it's my bass. It's all very confusing, and I am 100% livid. No one is offering up any possible solution or excuse for why they stole my bass. And at that point, I remember I still have some band merch in my possession, so I took a box full of, I don't know, I want to say maybe 150 CDs, and I took a picture of me dumping it over into a garbage can, just on the side of my house, me dumping it into like this city garbage can, and I posted that on their Facebook page, and I was like, where's my bass? And you know, I guess taking a picture of me destroying a bunch of their stuff and then posting a picture online where I called them like hippie thieves, that wasn't a great move because they still had the bass. If I could go back, I might change that a little bit. Maybe I'd post the picture after I got the bass back, if I ever did. I desperately wanted to show you that picture for this video, but I can't find it anywhere. Facebook has gone through like 3 million updates, and I don't think you can even post to pages anymore. So yeah, that picture is toast, unfortunately. So eventually I see that the LA Ranchers are back in town. By the way, I think the story that was starting to like crystallize at this point was that both Patrick and the main guy from the LA Ranchers had both cheated on their significant others, and then they told everyone that their significant others had cheated on them, and then they had all skipped town to Colorado. But anyway, they're back in town. I spring into action. And here is the one receipt that I actually have from this time period, and that is the Facebook messages that I exchanged with Patrick's wife. I don't mean to include you in this again, but Patrick won't communicate with me, and I still haven't received my bass back. I have knocked on his door multiple times at all hours of the day. Should I be involving the police? Patrick and I split up, and I don't live there anymore. I still have the key though. We could try to sneak over there. Oh, it's so good. I just love telling this part of the story. So that very day, Patrick's ex-wife, who I had played at their wedding or reception or something with, me and her went and did a stakeout at his place. And when the place was empty, she unlocked the door and we together searched his place for this bass. And when we found it, we tossed it in the back of my car. As I'm pulling out, this neighbor comes out, and the neighbor is yelling at me. He's calling me a thief, and he's threatening that he's gonna call the cops because they've seen that we've cased this joint, waited for Patrick to leave, and then come in and taken this bass. I don't think I've ever unloaded, my rage as much as I did on that dude, on that poor innocent bystander. But in a statement full of profanity that I won't even try to repeat, I let him know that he was living next to a thief, and his neighbor was a criminal, an awful man who had stolen my property, my bass, which was worth thousands of dollars, and that all I was doing was stealing it back. I was trying to recover my stolen property, and I told him that if he wanted to call the cops and make this more difficult on me, that, he could go straight to hell, blah, 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 so on and so forth. I let this guy have it, and the neighbor, he ended up apologizing to me. Looking back on it is one of the most ridiculous parts of the story, the fact that the neighbor is just like, hey man, I'm sorry your bass got stolen. This guy is kind of weird, I'm glad you got it back. It's kind of like someone telling a story and then at the end they're like, and everyone on the airplane clapped. Like, no joke, the neighbor who was gonna call the cops on me, he apologized and was like, hey, sorry for calling you a thief. Like, yeah, you're right, this guy is weird. Anyway, point is, I did a little break-in and entering, a little B&E, and what did I get? I got the bass back. But the story isn't over, because a handful of years later I actually ran into Patrick. He was sitting outside of this coffee shop in town, and he was very excited to see me. And I was gonna tell him off, but then I got kind of a good look at him. And I could see that life hadn't been like super easy on him. He looked like a mess. I don't know if it was drugs or what it was, or if he was living on the streets, but he didn't look great. And so I exchanged a couple sentences with him and I just walked away. I just left. No point bringing it up again. I got the bass and I'm happy. The next time I lent someone this bass, they begged to borrow it for like this local semi-pro gig, and they promptly broke it, and everyone involved in the production lied to me and kept all this information hidden from me. And then they tried to fix it with wood glue, and they left it with a permanent scar on the back of the neck. So I guess what I'm saying is, if you own an expensive instrument and other people want to borrow it who couldn't afford an instrument of that price, just say no. I've never had something good come out of me lending an instrument in that situation. Basically, it gets stolen or broken. So how about this? What if the moral is to put an air tag in your bass and then lend it to people? Then you can track it down when they head for the Southwest, and you can go over there and you can vacuum up all the pieces like they did with Bill Monroe's mandolin, because no matter what, it's either been broken or stolen.